There is currently no crime other than concealment of a body that may have occurred. There is no case being sent over to the LA County District Attorney's Office for potential review or potential prosecution.
The LAPD has just confirmed that there has been no progress in the David case. This means no murder charges have been filed, no case has been presented, absolutely nothing. We also have these newly discovered pictures of Celeste from David's personal camera, which the LAPD inexplicably failed to seize during their raid. In these photos, Celeste appears to be under the influence of something, which provides more evidence that her death may have been linked to drugs. Returning to the police statement, they are standing by their previous press release, which concluded, "It remains unclear whether there is any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of her body." So, we're supposed to believe that a 14-year-old girl turns up deceased, allegedly dismembered, in the trunk of a celebrity's car, hours away from her home, and the only crime is that her body was hidden. It defies logic. She certainly didn't put herself in that trunk, and it's doubtful she took her own life. Someone is responsible for this. But it seems the LAPD has hit a dead end.
So I think what it's saying is that they're still relying on what's going to come back from the medical examiner's office, since there's not a determination there, at least publicly. Now, are they in contact with the medical examiner? Absolutely. But listen, I don't think that's unintentional. They've been so tight-lipped. I think there has to be something to read into that. That again, I think the purpose of the initial release was to, get everybody possibly prepared that this isn't a homicide. And now they're saying we still don't have anything that shows that it is. But there's other, listen, a crime definitely occurred. And they even say that at least concealment of the body. But there's other crimes I hope they're investigating, such as the relationship. I understand it's a tough case to make because she's not around anymore. She can't testify, but it doesn't mean because it's hard, it shouldn't be, pursued. And, it may be a case that, let's say they did get a good toxicology result back, but it's not an overdose. Now it throws it back into, okay, so then you got really limited options. It's either a homicide or, if she took her own life. Then they'd really have to dig in, because if it wasn't glaringly obvious from the initial autopsy, in other words, if there's not a gunshot wound or something like that, then, they're going to have to maybe get forensic anthropologists involved that specialize in trying to make these determinations on severely decomposed bodies, which can take a while. But something, like you said, I've been tracking those other cases and they've come back with toxicology now. In fact, she's the only one of 26 deaths on September 8th that doesn't have a cause and manner. And so it's a little bit, it's concerning, but which way it goes is hard to tell, because they could have, needed additional testing.
Another unsettling aspect of this case is that we still haven't received the toxicology results. As you know, this is the crucial piece of information we've been anticipating from the start, as it will reveal the cause of death, whether Celeste was shot, stabbed, had a broken neck, overdosed, or had any other marks on her body. However, it has been over 2 months since her body was found on September 8th. More than 20 other individuals who died on that same day have had their toxicology reports released. So why has Celeste's not? As Steve Fisher mentioned in the clip, there's a strong possibility that if the body had been in the trunk for weeks or even months, it could be in such a state of decomposition that obtaining an accurate test result is impossible. This seems like a plausible scenario. Yet, at the same time, some are suggesting her results may be under a security hold. Many people are referencing public timelines from other cases, currently being handled by the Los Angeles Medical Examiner's Office, leading them to expect a very near release of Celeste's toxicology and cause of death. However, I urge you not to hold your breath, as it is highly likely that this case is under a security hold. In short, the cause of death can be temporarily suppressed during an active investigation. When the cause of death is finally released to the public, everyone will be able to see it. During a security hold, however, no one outside of law enforcement working on the case, including unaffiliated private investigators, will receive the cause of death. Those with access to the information can only communicate details that have been approved by the Medical Examiner's Public Information Office. I think this point is extremely valid. It makes absolutely no sense that her results haven't been submitted when everyone else's have. The California Public Records Act contains a specific provision allowing for the temporary suppression of cause of death and toxicology findings if their release would jeopardize an active investigation. This makes sense. Imagine if the results were made public on the internet. It would instantly go viral, dominate the news, generate countless theories, and place unnecessary pressure on the police and investigators when they are trying to put together such a huge case. We already know that multiple people are tangled up in this Messer family. David, David's friends, and who knows who else. Therefore, I believe keeping things confidential and keeping the public out of the loop is probably the wisest approach right now.
I think if they got a good toxicology, let's say it came back and it was clearly an overdose of some sort, whether somebody administered that or she took it herself and it was an accident is a different thing. The cause would be, a rote manner would be whether it was self-administered or administered by someone else. I would think that there would have been some sort of indication by now, and that could be then initial charges could be dropped. I don't know why initial charges couldn't be dropped now, even if they have the stack on top of them, because I know that they'll probably say, well, he's cooperating. But how much, if it's been 2 months and you haven't gotten the answer yet, is he really cooperating? So, it means he's probably not. He's probably, the counsel's telling him not to. And what's the difference if he's Mirandized or not, now?
And to be clear about something, okay? If they come back and they say, listen, there's no evidence to support that Celeste was killed, right? There's no evidence to support homicide charges, manslaughter, murder, anything like that. Is that consistent with what you're seeing in your private investigation? Are you hearing or seeing something different? Would you be surprised if that's the ultimate conclusion?
I'll just be honest, we really don't know. Nobody has stepped forward, even wanting to be anonymous and off the record and said, listen, I know what happened. So it's very bizarre that there's this many people involved that have stayed this quiet for this long, especially like when they're young. And it's like they're all lawyered up, to be honest with you. And I don't know if that's because maybe he's providing counsel to all of them, but there's no leaks coming out. And that's kind of bizarre with this many people involved, younger people that kind of want to save themselves, and they're blowing their careers up. So it seems like there's something that they're trying to protect, but I don't know what it is yet.
I find it absolutely bizarre that David has not been named a suspect, arrested, or even brought in for questioning. But simultaneously, I think this might be a deliberate strategy. The LAPD and the detectives are likely taking their time to slowly build an absolutely solid case, hoping to secure a murder charge. This is because if they rush the arrest without strong evidence for murder, he might not have to stay in jail and could likely be released on bond. Consider the case of YNW Melly, who was arrested for murder back in 2019 and has been incarcerated for years, yet still hasn't been convicted due to issues with the case too. If the LAPD rushes this, compromises their case, and so on, it could worsen the situation. If they present weak evidence, he could be found not guilty and potentially walk away free. So, as much as I'm frustrated by the lack of an arrest or any real progress in the case, I believe it might be for the best in the long run.
If someone just moved Celeste's body, possibly under California law, that may be just a misdemeanor. There's a law that says every person who, having knowledge of an accidental death, actively conceals or attempts to conceal that death shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable by imprisonment in a county jail for not more than 1 year, or by a fine of not less than $1,000 nor more than $10,000, or by both that fine and imprisonment. The reason people are talking about this law now is because if we are coming to the conclusion that this really may be it, am I wrong? Is that really what, we might be looking at?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And, I've brought this up for a while now, that you can willfully conceal and suppress evidence and destroy evidence to hide it from investigators and family and everybody else, and it's still a misdemeanor. And let's just be real about it. None of these people appear to, or an initial orbit, have a record, so they're not going to get up to a year in county jail. They're going to get probation if they're charged. So it's tremendous. Now it shifts to a felony when you mutilate a body. Now, and of course, we've heard these reports since the beginning of her being dismembered. I do not believe that. I believe it was disinterculation, that's a natural process of the connective tissues degrading and the bones, falling apart. I don't have any evidence that she was dismembered, so I don't think that's the case. You could hide her in a trunk from investigators and destroy evidence, and it's a misdemeanor in California.
If we're saying, okay, how did she die then? And I know that there's been a conversation, well, let's say for argument's sake, and this is purely speculation, if you're talking about drugs being involved, is the LAPD saying that this is not a drug-related death, or that someone wouldn't be responsible for it? Because you would think it is possible, we've seen it before, someone could be charged with an overdose. Someone could be charged with drug offenses, even in severe cases. If they provide drugs that result in an overdose, you could look at, let's say, involuntary manslaughter. Someone could be brought up on charges of distributing those drugs, providing those drugs, particularly to a minor. If they're not saying that at that point, right? I mean, that could be because there's no evidence of that, or maybe it's they're saying, the LAPD, we don't even want to mention drugs. We don't even want to mention drugs at this point. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, it could be. So, listen, this is a high-profile case, and let's look at other high-profile cases that's similar to this. Mac Miller, Matthew Perry, both times people charged with providing him the drugs they overdosed on. So maybe there is a drug element to this investigation going on that we don't know about.
Now, this is the most troubling part of the current situation. If they decide to proceed with David's arrest, based on the evidence they have so far, there's a possibility he will only be charged with the concealment of a body. This is a misdemeanor that carries a maximum sentence of 1 year in jail and a fine, meaning he would most likely receive probation, bond, or community service. My question, and I need your help with this in the comments, is how they could even prove they were in a relationship. I know we are aware of the photos and other contexts, but in court, if the police were trying to charge him for being in a relationship with a minor, what concrete evidence could they use to prove it? They would probably need to find texts, photos, videos, or perhaps even track her phone's GPS movements. I just think it would be quite challenging considering she is no longer here to testify against him or assist the police. However, the clip brought up a very crucial point. If it was, in fact, an overdose, the police will most likely pursue charges against whoever supplied her with the substances, as we've seen this exact scenario play out before. Do you recall the Mac Miller case? Mac tragically passed away in 2018 from an accidental overdose. But what happened afterward is key. Federal investigators didn't stop at the overdose. They went after the drug dealers who provided him with the fake oxycodone pills that were laced with fentanyl. And 3 people were ultimately charged. One of them, Stephen Walter, pleaded guilty and received 17 years in prison. That demonstrates how seriously cases involving narcotics are treated. Therefore, if Celeste's case reveals a similar cause of death, the police may follow the same path, targeting the drug suppliers or anyone who helped cover up the incident. And now, it starts to make a little more sense why they didn't call an ambulance or simply call for help if she did overdose. They were likely at a party where everyone was drinking and using substances, and suddenly, they have a 14-year-old girl dying in their home who shouldn't have been there in the first place. Knowing they all might face drug supply charges, they panicked and hid the body. That is by no means an excuse. I'm just explaining what was likely their thought process.
From your investigation into that house, can you say at this point whether drugs were ever found at that house or connected to that house?
So I can tell you that there was prescription narcotic medication, opiate, painkillers that were found, but they were prescribed. And so we don't know if they were ever used recreationally or not. There was some paraphernalia there, but listen, marijuana is legal in California, and it's something that you could use for that. You could also use it for illicit drugs. We don't know what they were being used for. I've seen some pictures of Celeste where she doesn't look sober. I'll just be honest with you. She looks like she's definitely not sober. And I've talked to people in Lake Elsinore that said when she came back after that time that law enforcement brought her back, that she was quote unquote strung out. And so I don't know, and I hate to say that about a minor because I don't have proof of it. I'm just telling you what I've been told. But if that's indeed the case, then hopefully there's a drug element going, investigation going on that we don't know about. They're just being very tight-lipped. But listen, it's been a while now.
So, apparently, there were drugs in the house. Not illegal drugs, per se, but prescribed opium. But isn't that still a highly addictive and dangerous substance? Just off the top of my head, countless rappers like Juice WRLD and Lil Peep, and even Prince, all died because of prescription painkillers. So, even if the drugs weren't some questionable fentanyl-laced substance, it doesn't make the situation any less serious. At the same time, I really doubt Celeste was taking opioids. I'm unsure.
You don't have to have a tape of a sex act going on in order to prove that. But it also showed that, listen, she had a lot of freedom at a very young age. Now there's photos of her at a concert in Vegas when she was 13 years old at a concert that he was playing at. Of course, the other stuff we've already talked about, which is her at that high school graduation and her showing up arguing with the neighbors. These are all during the time that she's reported as a missing person. Law enforcement should have been notified. At that graduation, I don't believe that she was the only person in her family there. I think that there was several adult family members there, and there was school police officers at that graduation. I don't know why somebody didn't say, hey, by the way, this is a missing person. And, they would go the route they normally go and make sure that she's okay and find out what's going on. But none of that happened. It seemed like she just showed up like at a family event and then went back to wherever it was she was staying. And that's concerning because she wasn't in school and there wasn't these controls and that are there for a reason.
As I discussed in my last video, it's incredibly strange that Celeste was reported missing in 2024. Yet she was seen at her cousin's graduation and on CGTV at her home. So why was she still listed as missing? Why didn't her parents or anyone in the family call in and say, oh, hey, our daughter is home. You can stop looking for her. This raises the question, did they do it intentionally? Did they avoid reporting her as safely returned so she could skip school and go meet David and We have just received new information revealing that her cousin, Esmeralda, did take her to a theme park with David. Then, in 2023, Esmeralda's mom took her to a Las Vegas show where David was performing. So, was her family actually facilitating her meetings with David? To me, it appears they were aware of it, allowed it, and didn't care. He's a wealthy celebrity who lives in the Hollywood Hills. They were probably dazzled by that. And well, look how it ended. Honestly, this is where the case begins to feel profoundly wrong. Because every detail we've covered, from the LAPD saying there's no criminal involvement, to the missing toxicology results, to the prescribed opioid, to the possibility that her own family helped her meet David, nothing really connects logically. A 14-year-old girl ends up dead in a celebrity's car trunk, and somehow, no one is in custody. It's just another open file sitting on an officer's desk. And for me, that's the scary part. There's a real chance this case could simply fade into obscurity, unless people keep discussing it or the police actually decide to take action. Because from what we've seen so far, the system only seems to move when the internet begins to demand and push for answers. So, yes, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the LAPD is actually building a strong case behind the scenes, or are they just stalling? And do you think David will be charged? Or is this whole affair about to be swept under the rug? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next